All right, I'm doing interpretations for Scorpio through all of the planets and the Ascendant. This will give you a sense of what each Scorpio placement means and maybe help you tease out how, a Scorpio Venus might be different from a Scorpio Ascendant. Anytime someone has a Scorpio placement in their chart, we're talking about a battlefield between higher forces and lower forces, a conflict between heaven and hell. It's about balancing and wielding the dark shadow of the soul, the evil associated with that, and the renewing potential associated with that, along with, on the other side, the expression of personal power in the material world, in daily life. And it's usually not possible to balance those until an individual has gone through many painful cycles of trial and error, where personal will and projection, right, has been completely subsumed by darkness and failure and disappointment and grief or destruction, and the whole thing burns over and restarts until new life is born and the cycle starts all over again. Kind of intense, right? So someone that has Scorpio Ascendant, Scorpio Rising, out of all placements, these people carry the most recognizable appearance of Scorpio. Extremely intense eyes, an intense face, a very unapproachable, kind of intimidating sort of presence and aura. Sometimes it's very clear why, sometimes it's very unclear, right? You may not even look that scary, but people just sense your intensity and it scares them a little bit. With other Scorpio placements, except maybe the Sun, individuals are usually able to hide their Scorpio energy, at least in certain moments. If you're a Scorpio rising, there's nowhere to hide. You can never hide it. And the battle between, dark and light forces, right? Between truth and purity and toxic negativity and darkness, that's going to be a theme and a frame and a lens through which your entire experience of life is going to pass through and is going to be colored by. So Scorpio rising isn't necessarily the most internally felt, like on the emotional level or the thought level, but the road that you're walking through life is always going to be Scorpio themed, and there's no avoiding it. Those with Scorpio Sun, again, never really able to hide the Scorpio energy. People usually sense that you're a Scorpio, or they sense an intensity that's always out in front. You can think about your sun sign as, how would you ultimately choose to act in a given situation, right? And how does that compare to some of your other friends in that situation? It's not really about reacting. The sun doesn't necessarily tell us how we react, but it's ultimately about how we act, right? It's the decisions that we make, it's the will that we carry. Someone with a Scorpio sun, right? They're gonna be very Scorpionic. They're going to be somewhat reserved. They are going to pick their relationships carefully. When they ultimately make commitments to certain things, whether that's certain life tracks or certain partners or living in certain places, they do it with a doggone intensity and stubbornness. And if they don't create it for themselves, there's always going to be external events that are going to challenge that are going to create that Plutonic, Scorpionic tension that I talked about in the beginning, which is going to force Scorpio Sun to, again, respond, adjust course in specific ways, and integrate those experiences into new modes of being. It's very all or nothing with Scorpio Suns. It's most obvious for them where they are in that battle, in that cycle between lower realms and darkness in low places versus higher vibrations, higher manifestations of Scorpio. Because where and how they're living their life is going to show you, and people are going to be able to see that. Typically not something that's hidden. They command respect, they command attention, they intimidate. Whereas a Scorpio rising should really look to Scorpionic energy to sort of make sense of their life and look for routes out of challenging situations or look for guidance and wisdom. A Scorpio sun is really just living it. They are the Scorpio energy. Their life is a story about a Scorpio. Scorpio moon, take all the intensity of a Scorpio sun, right? And that intensity that's wrought by that underlying challenge between death and rebirth, between the cry of the soul to express itself in all of its intensity and the ability to maintain a calmness and a calm demeanor in life. That is like on steroids for a Scorpio moon, because that cycle is just constantly in motion. The moon is the fastest moving planetary body, and so someone with the moon in Scorpio can experience the highs and the lows of that Plutonic cycle, all within moments, right? Or within hours. Something small that would never bother anyone or someone, might laugh off. A Scorpio moon is like dying on the inside. They're feeling this sort of visceral, annihilating pain over something silly, right? They're creating that scorpionic cycle just through their own emotions and reactions to things, which is just like powerful, but it's exhausting. When it's harnessed though, Scorpio moons can literally harness that amazing plutonic phoenix level transformation purely through their own sort of emotional momentum. So if they can kind of get control on that, it's extreme power, right? It's basically like lighter fluid that just never runs out. It just stays burning. On the other hand, Scorpio moons, maybe out of all of placements where Scorpio could be, go through probably the most painful periods of trial and error, and really it's many years, I think, before most Scorpio moons really start to get a handle on it. Until then, they go through just a lot of suffering. It's just sort of a rites of passage, because that Scorpio energy inside them is spinning so fast constantly, like a centrifuge. But if a centrifuge ever like breaks and goes off track, like it's like a tornado or a hurricane that just destroys everything in its path. So that's gonna happen many times to a Scorpio moon until like they kind of get everything working. And the frequency which they get completely thrown off track, right? It's kind of lessened. It stops happening quite as often. They don't necessarily need to respond to everything so intensely, and they don't need to bring their Scorpio, Pluto level reactions to everything. Sometimes they can just like dodge and step aside and pick their battles a little bit. Mercury with Scorpio is one of the best positions. I think for Mercury, these people have a penetrating mind. They have a penetrating analytical mind. And this is really where you see Scorpio's incredible power of memory comes through. Its incredible ability to pierce through what is false and fake and constructed through false narrative and really see to the soul and to the core of something. Mercury tells us not only about how an individual communicates, right, but also their thought process, their inner monologue, what they're thinking, how they process information. And so a person with Scorpio Mercury, even if they have no other Scorpio in the rest of their chart, that person can come across as very Scorpionic. Sometimes in some situations more than a Scorpio moon, right? Because if someone with a Scorpio moon isn't necessarily triggered, or they have a lot of other more lighter signs in the rest of their chart, that person may not look at all like a Scorpio until something triggers it, and then people are like, holy shit. Whereas like Scorpio Mercury, the way that people communicate and the way that they're interacting in social situations is always going to be Scorpionic. And so they might have a very piercing tongue, or they might say like, they strike with their mouth and their words. It can cut people down, and they can bite and snap and sting. Or the way they get to the heart of an issue in a conversation by just piercing through. People can really see that intensity and sense it. Feels very Scorpionic. These people have like a lot of like mic drop moments, or the way that they communicate or say things or argue. People have the reaction of like, Jesus Christ, like I did not see that, like whoa. That just got real. People that have Scorpio on Venus, if you've seen a lot of my other videos about what it's like dating a Scorpio, or what it's like when you break up with a Scorpio or Scorpio breaks up with you, a lot of this is very applicable to someone that has Scorpio and Venus. They think about relationships in all or nothing terms. They demand complete loyalty from a partner. They want to know people better than anyone else knows them, and they're going to experience a lot of those Scorpionic highs and lows through their relationships with others. They're going to have incredibly high standards for their partners, also high standards for themselves. You have a lot of that Scorpionic intensity that's also applicable to how a person feels about themselves and cares about themselves. People with Scorpio Venus are very like intense about their like workout regimes, or they can really grind and focus for long periods of times without really like focusing on eating or drinking water or stuff. It's just that intensity in terms of how they approach the things that they value and the things that they love. Scorpio Venus really wants a ride or die partner. They want ride or die friendships. They have a tendency towards jealousy. And again, what I've been saying about Scorpio generally is true. It's just, again, in the domain of how they're relating to other people, how they want to bring love and harmony into their life. They want to do it in an extremely intense way. They want to feel like they have control over it. They don't like losing things. They don't like losing things that are important to them. Very afraid of rejection, very afraid of failure with this position. With Scorpio in Mars This is, again, an extremely powerful placement. These individuals usually go extremely hard after what they decide they want, through all obstacles, through all barriers. They will accomplish it if they want to. And then they usually get it and find out this is like not what I wanted. And there's this kind of almost death or letdown period. And then they start the cycle over again, where they, again, direct their energy in a completely different direction. So people with Scorpio and Mars, think about that scorpionic energy as the theme of how they're projecting themselves and their will out in the world. This is also a scary placement, right? Because Mars says a lot about how we express our aggression and our will, and particularly when we're angry and we're defending ourselves. That's all going to be incredibly scorpionic. So it's going to be till death, not literally, but Scorpio Mars is going to hit below the belt. There's going to be that scorpionic tendency, more of a lower tendency, but still a tendency to want to get revenge, to want to sting others when they feel like they're threatened or in danger. They want to hurt. Sometimes they say really mean things that they regret in the heat of the moment, or they do mean things that they can regret in the heat of the moment. So much intensity though, so much staying power. When they use this placement wisely and they're directing it towards higher aims, like their goals or love and commitment towards something, it's just such a sign of loyalty, again, staying power, and just a raw ability to succeed and win and survive literally at any costs.